The old church sat quietly at the edge of the small town, its weathered stone walls and stained glass windows whispering stories of decades gone by. Inside, the air was cool and filled with a stillness that seemed untouched by the outside world. Sister Maria moved gently between the pews, her simple black habit flowing softly as she carried a basket of flowers to the altar. She paused for a moment, her hands clasping the edge of the basket tightly as she glanced up at the crucifix above her. The faint glow of candlelight danced across her face, reflecting a sense of peace and resolve that came from years of faith and dedication. Outside, the sound of laughter broke the silence. It wasn't the kind of joyful laughter that often filled the church on Sunday mornings. It was sharp, mocking, and tinged with something darker. Sister Maria turned her head slightly toward the door, her brow furrowing just enough to reveal the flicker of concern. She took a deep breath, finishing her task before stepping toward the entrance. The heavy wooden doors creaked as she pushed them open, and the sunlight poured in, momentarily blinding her. Standing at the bottom of the church steps were three young men. Their clothes were worn in a way that suggested rebellion rather than necessity. Baggy jeans, leather jackets, and an array of tattoos peeking out from under their sleeves. They leaned against the railing casually, their voices carrying a tone that was meant to intimidate. Sister Maria's voice was calm but firm as she greeted them. "Good afternoon. Can I help you with something?" One of the men, taller than the others with a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes, stepped forward. "Yeah, we were just wondering if the church was open. Figured we could come in and pray." His companions snickered behind him. Maria's eyes didn't waver, though there was a heaviness in her heart. She had seen this kind of bravado before, the kind that often masked something deeper: pain, fear, or a desperate need for attention. "The church is always open for those seeking peace and guidance," she said gently. The shorter of the three, a wiry young man with a jagged scar across his cheek, spat on the ground near her feet. "Peace, guidance? What's that gonna do for us?" The taller one, clearly the leader, leaned in closer. "You know, sister, maybe you could say a prayer for us, or maybe we could stick around and help out. What do you think?" His tone was mockingly sweet, but there was an edge to it that made her uneasy. Maria's hands remained steady, folded neatly in front of her. "You are welcome to come inside and sit if you'd like. This is a place of respect and sanctuary." The leader laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the quiet street. "Sanctuary? Yeah, sure. We'll keep that in mind." He stepped back, gesturing to his friends to follow. But as they began to turn away, he added, "We might come back later, sister. Don't lock up too early." Maria watched as they walked down the road, their voices fading into the distance. She sighed, a mixture of relief and unease washing over her. She wasn't afraid for herself. Her faith had always been her shield. But she worried about the intentions of those young men. Trouble had a way of finding people like them, and she prayed silently that they would find a better path before it was too late. Later that evening, the church was quiet once more. The soft glow of the setting sun filtered through the stained glass, painting the walls with hues of red and gold. Maria knelt at the altar, her head bowed in prayer. She didn't hear the footsteps at first. They were slow, deliberate, and just quiet enough to blend into the ambient creaks of the old building. When she finally looked up, the three men were standing in the doorway. Their earlier bravado seemed to have grown into something more menacing. The leader held a baseball bat, resting it casually on his shoulder, while the others carried themselves with an air of anticipation. "Evening, sister," the leader said, his voice dripping with mock politeness. "We thought we'd take you up on your offer. Find some guidance." Maria stood slowly, her heart steady despite the growing tension in the room. "This is a house of God. You are welcome to be here, but not with violence in your heart." The scared man chuckled, shaking his head. "Violence? Who said anything about violence?" The leader took a step forward, his smirk widening. "We just wanted to have a little chat. get to know you better. Maybe see if there's anything we can do for the church. Maria didn't flinch, but her mind raced. She needed to keep them calm, to de-escalate the situation before it spiraled out of control. If you truly want to help, then leave this place in peace. I will pray for you. The leader's smile faded, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. Pray for us? Lady, we don't need your prayers. Before he could say more, a faint sound caught his attention. It was distant but distinct, the low rumble of an engine. The men turned their heads toward the sound, their postures stiffening slightly. Maria's heart lifted, though she kept her expression neutral. The sound grew louder, and moments later, a motorcycle pulled up outside the church. The man who dismounted was tall and broad-shouldered, his movements precise and deliberate. He wore a leather jacket, but it wasn't the kind meant for show. His face was calm, almost unreadable, but his sharp eyes carried a weight that demanded respect. He stepped inside, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. The gang members exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier confidence faltering. The newcomer's gaze swept the room, landing briefly on Sister Maria, before locking onto the leader of the group. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice low and steady. The leader straightened up, trying to reclaim his bravado. "No problem. We were just talking to the sister here." The man's eyes narrowed slightly. It didn't sound like talking. Maria's lips parted, but she said nothing. She knew better than to interrupt. The tension in the room was palpable, and the air seemed to crackle with unspoken threats. The leader took a step forward, his grip tightening on the bat. "And who are you supposed to be?" he asked, his tone defiant, but lacking the conviction it held earlier. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a slow step closer, his posture relaxed, but his presence imposing. When he finally spoke, his words were calm, but carried a weight that silenced the room. "I'm her brother." The leader's smirk faltered as he sized up the man standing before him. There was something about the newcomer that unsettled him, a quiet confidence, a presence that demanded attention without needing to shout or posture. The leader cleared his throat and gestured loosely with the bat. "Her brother, huh? Well, that's cute. But we're not here to cause trouble." The man's gaze didn't waver. He took another step forward, the space between him and the gang narrowing. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "Then you should leave. Now." The scared man snorted, trying to inject some bravado into the situation. "What are you going to do if we don't, huh? There's 3 of us and 1 of you." Maria's brother didn't respond immediately. Instead, he let his silence hang in the air, a tangible force that seemed to weigh heavily on the gang members. Finally, he spoke, his tone as steady as ever. "I've seen what happens when people like you think you're untouchable. Trust me, you don't want to find out what happens next." The leader hesitated, the bat slipping slightly in his grip. His companions glanced at each other, the unease in their expressions growing. It was clear they were used to being the ones in control, and this man was throwing them off balance. Maria stepped forward then, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Please, all of you, this isn't the way. You're better than this." The leader's jaw tightened, and for a moment, it looked as though he might lash out. But then he took a step back, his shoulders stiff. "Fine. We'll go, but this isn't over." He pointed a finger at Maria's brother. "You'd better watch yourself." Without waiting for a response, he turned and stalked out of the church, his companions trailing after him. The door slammed shut behind them, leaving a heavy silence in their wake. Maria exhaled slowly, her hands trembling slightly as she pressed them together. Her brother turned to her, his expression softening. "Are you okay?" She nodded, though her eyes betrayed the lingering fear. "I am. Thank you for coming when you did." He gave her a small smile, though there was a shadow behind it. "I got your message. I came as soon as I could." Maria's brother, Daniel, had always been the protector. Growing up, He had taken it upon himself to shield her from the harsh realities of their world. When their parents passed away, he joined the Marines, hoping to build a future for both of them. Over the years, his letters had been sparse, his visits even rarer. But Maria had always known he'd come if she truly needed him. "They'll be back," Maria said quietly, their gaze fixed on the closed doors. I could see it in their eyes. They're angry, and they're lost. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then we'll be ready. They're not going to hurt you, Maria. Not while I'm here." She reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "Violence isn't the answer. I spent years trying to help people like them. They need compassion, not more fighting." Daniel looked at her, his eyes searching hers. "I know you mean well. But some people don't change unless they're forced to. You're my sister, and I'm not going to let anyone lay a hand on you." The conversation was interrupted by the faint sound of footsteps outside. Daniel's hand instinctively moved to his side, where a small knife was sheathed under his jacket. Maria's breath caught as the door creaked open again. This time, it wasn't the gang. A young woman stepped inside, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. She looked barely out of her teens, her clothes disheveled and her hands clutching a small bundle to her chest. "Please," she said, her voice trembling. "I need help." Maria stepped forward immediately, her nurturing instincts kicking in. "What's wrong, my child?" The girl's gaze darted around the room before landing on Daniel. She hesitated, as though deciding whether to trust him, then turned back to Maria. "They're after me. I don't know where else to go." Maria's heart sank. "Who's after you?" The girl shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know their names, but they've been following me for days. They said I took something that belongs to them, but I didn't. I swear I didn't." Daniel stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. "You're safe here. No one's going to hurt you. What did they say you took?" The girl hesitated, her fingers tightening around the bundle. Slowly, she unwrapped it, revealing a small, ornate box. It looked old, the kind of thing that might hold something valuable. Daniel frowned, his military instincts kicking in as he examined it from a distance. "Where did you get that?" he asked. The girl's voice was barely a whisper. "I found it in an abandoned house. I didn't think anyone would care, but now they won't leave me alone." Maria exchanged a glance with Daniel. The box clearly meant something to someone, and if the gang was involved, it was unlikely they'd let it go easily. Daniel's mind raced as he considered their options. Whatever this girl had stumbled into, it was dangerous, and now it had found its way to the church. "We need to figure out who's after you," Daniel said, "and why." The girl nodded, her hands shaking as she rewrapped the box. Maria placed a comforting arm around her shoulders, guiding her to sit on one of the pews. Daniel moved toward the door, his eyes scanning the darkening street outside. He knew this was only the beginning. The storm was coming, and they would all have to face it together. Daniel's sharp eyes scanned the darkening street outside the church, his senses heightened. The small town's quiet seemed almost unnatural now, a fragile silence that could shatter at any moment. He turned back to Maria and the young girl, who sat on the pew clutching the ornate box tightly to her chest. Her fear was palpable, but Maria's calm presence seemed to offer some measure of comfort. "We can't stay here," Daniel said, his voice low and steady. "If they know she's inside, they'll come for her, and they won't care about the church." Maria frowned, but she knew he was right. Her brother's experience in the Marines had taught him how to anticipate danger, and she trusted his instincts. "Where can we go?" she asked softly. Daniel's mind raced. "There's a safe place I know, not far from here. An old friend runs it. He can help us figure out who's after her and why." He glanced at the girl. "But we have to move fast." The girl nodded, her eyes wide. "I'll go wherever you think is safe." Daniel led them out of the church through a side entrance, keeping to the shadows as they moved. The town streets were eerily quiet, but he knew better than to assume they were alone. They walked quickly, the tension thick in the air. As they rounded a corner, the faint hum of an engine reached Daniel's ears. He froze, holding up a hand to signal Maria and the girl to stop. A black SUV rolled slowly down the street, its windows tinted. Daniel's jaw tightened. This was no coincidence. The gang had escalated their pursuit, and now they were hunting in earnest. He motioned for the others to follow him into an alley, his movements swift and deliberate. They crouched behind a stack of crates as the SUV crept closer. Daniel's hand rested on the knife at his side, his mind calculating their next move. The vehicle paused for a moment, its engine idling, before continuing down the street. Daniel let out a slow breath, but didn't relax. "They're patrolling," he murmured. "We'll have to take the back streets." The small group navigated the maze of alleys and side roads, every step laden with tension. Finally, they reached the safe house, a modest building tucked away behind a row of abandoned shops. Daniel knocked twice, paused, then knocked 3 more times. The door opened, revealing a grizzled man with sharp eyes and a knowing look. "Daniel," the man said, his voice gravelly, "didn't expect to see you here." "I need your help, Scene," Daniel replied. "It's urgent." Scene stepped aside, allowing them to enter. The interior was sparse but secure, with reinforced windows and a collection of gear that suggested Scene had seen his share of trouble. Daniel quickly explained the situation, and Scene listened intently, his expression grim. "That box she's carrying," Scene said, nodding toward the girl. "It's not just valuable, it's dangerous. If the wrong people get their hands on it, they could use it to cause a lot of harm." Maria's brow furrowed. "What's in it?" Scene hesitated, then sighed. "A map, but not just any map. It's a guide to a cache of weapons that was supposed to have been destroyed years ago. Whoever's after her wants to find that cache, and they'll stop at nothing to get it." The girl's face went pale. "I didn't know. I thought it was just pretty." Daniel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's not your fault. But now we have to make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands." C nodded. "We can't stay here for long. They'll find us eventually. But I know someone who can secure the box and make sure it disappears for good." Before they could finalize their plans, the sound of footsteps outside froze them in place. Daniel's hand went to his knife, and Scene reached for a nearby shotgun. The footsteps grew louder, and then the door burst open. The gang leader stepped inside, flanked by his companions and 2 more men armed with guns. "Told you this wasn't over," the leader sneered. Daniel stepped forward, placing himself between the gang and the others. "This is your last chance to walk away. You don't know who you're dealing with." The leader laughed, but it was forced. Big talk for someone who's outnumbered. What happened next was a blur of movement and chaos. Daniel moved with precision, disarming one of the armed men before they could react. Scene fired a warning shot, scattering the gang members and creating enough confusion for Maria and the girl to retreat to safety. The leader lunged at Daniel, swinging wildly, but Daniel's training gave him the upper hand. Within moments, the gang was subdued, their weapons stripped away. Breathing heavily, the leader glared up at Daniel from where he lay on the ground. "You think this is over? There's more of us. You can't stop all of us." Daniel crouched down, his voice cold and steady. "You tell whoever sent you that the box is gone. If I see any of you again, you won't get a warning." The gang retreated, their bravado shattered. Once they were gone, Scene quickly made arrangements to transport the box to a trusted contact. The girl hugged Maria tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't helped me." Maria smiled gently. "You're safe now. That's all that matters." As dawn broke over the quiet town, Daniel stood outside the church, watching the horizon. Maria joined him, her expression hopeful. "Will they come back?" she asked softly. Daniel shook his head. "Not for a long time. And if they do, we'll be ready. Maria placed a hand on his arm. "You've always protected me. Thank you for being here." He looked at her, a rare softness in his eyes. "Always." The church bells rang out, their sound carrying a sense of hope and renewal. For now, the danger had passed, and the small group could begin to heal. They had faced the storm together and come out stronger, bound by faith, courage, and an unshakable determination to protect what mattered most.